I was just a janitor, a nobody. No one knew my name. No one looked me in the eyes. I scrubbed floors while they signed million-dollar contracts, invisible in a beige uniform and calloused hands. But that day, someone called my name by mistake. I walked into a meeting full of executives who didn't even know I existed. And within 1 hour, I said something that would change the future of their company, and mine, forever. Sometimes all it takes is one mistake to finally be seen. If you've ever felt invisible, maybe this story is for you. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. I used to wonder if people could die from being unseen. I mean, not physically, but slowly, quietly, like a candle burning out in a room no one walks into. That's how I felt most days, like a flickering light, fighting not to disappear completely. My job at Westbridge Technologies started just after the pandemic. I wasn't their first choice, or their second. They'd gone through 2 janitorial companies before landing on the cheaper one, the one that outsourced people like me, with no insurance, no benefits, no name on the company email list. I cleaned the office towers on the 34th floor. That's where the executives worked. I learned to memorize their coffee orders without meaning to, just from the smell. Mr. Campbell liked his espresso burnt. Lisa Huang left lipstick on every glass. The CEO's corner office always smelled like cedarwood and ambition. No one ever said thank you. No one looked me in the eye. And honestly, I got used to it. My uniform was beige, always beige. It matched the walls, the floor, the mood. My name tag said Emily C., like even my last name was too much to ask. Most days I kept my head down. I cleaned quickly, efficiently, invisibly. But there was a part of me, a stubborn part, that refused to shrink entirely. I'd found a copy of Harvard Business Review in the recycling bin once. It was still crisp, like nobody had even flipped through it. I took it home, read every article, underlined paragraphs like I was studying for an exam that would never come. After that, I started collecting all the business material they threw away. Financial reports, marketing strategy decks, even shareholder memos. They thought I was tossing trash. I was building a curriculum. By the time I turned 26, I could read a profit and loss statement faster than some junior analysts. I knew the company's cost centers, their burn rate, their Q3 downturn. I studied their mistakes, their blind spots. But I knew no one would ever ask me what I thought. Until the day they did. But we'll get to that. Let me tell you first about my mornings. I woke up every day at 4:30 a.m., not because I liked the sunrise, but because I shared a 1-bedroom apartment with my younger brother Marcus and our mother. Mom had long COVID. Some days she couldn't even get out of bed. Marcus was 14, angry at the world for all the things he couldn't fix. And I didn't blame him. I'd make instant oatmeal, boil some eggs if we had them, kiss Mom's forehead, and make sure Marcus was awake for school. Then I'd grab my uniform and walk 2 blocks to catch the 55 bus, which always smelled like cold vinyl and old coffee. The bus ride took 45 minutes. I used that time to read, whatever I could get my hands on. One day it was The Lean Startup. Another, it was Women Who Lead. Always something that reminded me I wasn't stupid, that I just hadn't been given the chance. I arrived at the Westbridge Tower at exactly 6:58 a.m. every day. Not 7 Oz because that would be late. Not 6:50, because they didn't pay me for that. I'd greet the security guard, Raoul, one of the few people who actually remembered my name. He'd smile and say, "Morning, Emily." And for 30 seconds, I existed. From there, I took the back elevator, the one with the broken mirror. I'd look at my reflection and whisper things to myself like, "You're more than what they see," or "Don't let the dust settle on your dreams." It was corny. But sometimes, talking to yourself is the only pep talk you get. Once on the 34th floor, I'd plug in my headphones, turn on some lo-fi beats, and start cleaning. Bathrooms first, then conference rooms, then personal offices. It was always the same. Desks full of untouched notebooks, plants dying from neglect, whiteboards scribbled with jargon that sounded smarter than it was. I learned early to keep my head low and mouth shut, even when the interns made messes they pretended not to notice. But something changed the week before it happened. There was a memo left crumpled on the floor of the executive boardroom. Most janitors would have thrown it away. I flattened it out and read it. It was a financial alert. An emergency meeting had been scheduled to discuss a massive drop in investor confidence following a bad merger. That's when I knew something big was coming. I started paying more attention. I'd linger an extra second while cleaning the glass walls outside conference rooms, listening through the thin gaps. People were scared. The company was bleeding money. The CFO had gone quiet. A storm was coming, and nobody seemed to have a real plan. I wanted to scream at them. Look around. You've been operating like this for years. You forgot about the customers. You forgot about the people. You got greedy, but I was the janitor, the invisible one. So I kept scrubbing. I remember the night before the big meeting. I was in my room, sitting on a milk crate with my laptop propped on a stack of cookbooks. I was running simulations on a free budgeting tool I'd downloaded. I recreated the Westbridge financial model from scratch based on the documents I'd found. I wanted to understand it for myself, to prove that I could. My mother passed by the door and said, "Why don't you sleep like normal people?" And I smiled. "Because, Mama, one day they're going to see me." I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but deep inside, I knew that the world doesn't change unless someone like me refuses to disappear. And then came that Wednesday, the day they called my name. Not because they knew who I was, but because someone else didn't show up. And the receptionist made a mistake. One name, one moment, one seat at the table. And I was about to take it. It happened so fast, I almost didn't realize it had happened at all. That morning had started like any other. The coffee machine in the janitor's closet was broken, so I'd sipped half-warm instant coffee from my thermos. My fingers were stiff from the cold. San Francisco in late January was always wet and mean, the kind of chill that cuts through your bones even when the sun is out. I was on my knees wiping down the chrome legs of a boardroom chair when I heard someone call out from behind me. "Emily?" I turned, startled. It wasn't Raoul, the security guard, or anyone from my cleaning crew. It was Leah, one of the assistants from the reception desk on the 32nd floor. Sharp, young, always moving like she was 5 seconds behind a deadline. "You're Emily Carter, right?" she asked, barely looking up from the tablet in her hand. "Yes," I answered, unsure if I was in trouble. "Great. You're needed in conference room A for the 9-hour strategy session," she said. "Grab your badge and go. They're waiting." I opened my mouth to correct her. There had to be another Emily, one who wore heels, not rubber-soled janitor shoes. One who had a LinkedIn profile and a leather portfolio. One who belonged in a glass conference room with power players, not someone who sanitized toilets. But I didn't say anything, because something in my chest, maybe hunger, maybe God, said, "Go." I wiped my hands on my beige uniform, heart pounding in my throat. "Okay," I said softly. She handed me a temporary badge. "Don't be nervous," she added, misinterpreting my stunned silence. "Nathan Walker's running the meeting himself. You'll do great." Nathan Walker, founder and CEO of Westbridge Technologies. A man who once made the cover of Forbes next to the headline, "The Billionaire Disruptor." The kind of man who wore silence like a weapon. Cold, sharp, brilliant. He didn't know I existed. Not really. Maybe he'd seen me once pushing a mop cart, but to him, I was just background noise. Another faceless worker in a disposable uniform. I walked slowly down the hallway, unsure if I should turn around or keep going. I told myself I'd explain it was a mix-up once I got there. Maybe laugh it off. Maybe say I was just delivering something. But as I neared conference room A, I saw the doors open. The air inside was cooler, not from the AC, but from the weight of tension. Men and women in tailored suits sat around the long table with sleek tablets and notepads in front of them. No one looked up as I entered. I stood there for a full 3 seconds, paralyzed. A man near the front, older, silver hair, tight mouth, gestured toward an empty seat near the end of the table. "There you are," he said impatiently. "Let's begin." And just like that, I sat down. No one asked for my credentials. No one checked my name. No one even looked closely enough to notice that I was wearing a janitor's uniform under my black zip-up jacket. I should have spoken up. I should have corrected them. But instead, I opened the notebook I always carried with me, the same one where I scribbled ideas, business notes, strategy diagrams copied from discarded documents, and pretended I belonged. The meeting started with panic. The company had just lost its biggest investor. One of the board members had pulled out after a leaked memo showed mismanagement in a high-profile acquisition. The numbers were worse than I thought. Revenue was down 17% quarter over quarter. Employee turnover was at an all-time high. Customer satisfaction scores had plummeted. And to make things worse, a major competitor had just launched a product that made ours look obsolete overnight. People around the table threw out jargon like bullets. Rebrand the strategy. Flatten the org chart. Delay Series D. Cut down to bare ops. When one executive, a woman with perfectly straight posture and icy red lipstick, said, "We need a complete internal audit of all departments and immediate headcount optimization." Headcount optimization. I knew what that meant. People like me would be the first to go. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, the temp staff, anyone whose name wasn't on a glass office door. Nathan Walker hadn't spoken yet. He sat at the head of the table, flipping slowly through a report, his jaw clenched, his eyes unreadable. At one point, someone, I don't even remember who, made a snide joke about downsizing the non-core functions. And that's when it happened. I spoke. Not loudly, not confidently, just reflexively. "Maybe the problem isn't the staff," I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The air in the room snapped like a rubber band. Everyone turned to look at me. I froze. "What did you just say?" asked the woman with red lipstick. I wanted to disappear. I could feel my palms sweating, my heartbeat in my ears. I was sure they'd see through me now, see the old sneakers, see the faded company-issued pants, see me. But something in Nathan Walker's expression made me keep going. I cleared my throat. "I mean, it seems like the issues didn't start with the janitors or cafeteria staff. It started with leadership, with bloated marketing budgets, with product decisions that ignored user feedback. Cutting staff won't fix that. It'll just make it worse." Silence. Then laughter. Not everyone, just a few chuckles. Dismissive, annoyed. The red lipstick woman leaned back. "And you are?" I swallowed hard. "Emily Carter." "From which department?" I hesitated. And just as I was about to say janitorial services, Nathan Walker raised his hand. "Let her speak," he said. The room fell still again. He looked at me, really looked. The first time in my life someone like him had done that. Not as a ghost in the hallway, but as a person. "What would you suggest, Ms. Carter?" he asked. I looked around the room, pulse racing. And for the first time, I saw that no one else had the answer. They were all brilliant, educated, credentialed, but they were stuck inside the same box they'd been trained to think in. And I wasn't. "I think your problem isn't cash flow," I said. "It's clarity. You forgot who your customers are. You forgot what they care about. You're building for investors, not for people." That's when I knew something had shifted. Nathan leaned forward. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "With a real plan. Something actionable. I blinked. Me? Yes. You. And just like that, the janitor got a seat at the table. I left that boardroom with my legs shaking. I don't know how I made it to the elevator. I don't remember the ride down, or the walk through the glass lobby where high heels echoed like thunder on polished floors. I just remember standing on the sidewalk outside Westbridge Tower, staring at my reflection in the dark marble wall. I looked like a fraud. A girl in janitor pants and a windbreaker. No fancy briefcase, no degree, no business cards with embossed gold letters. And yet, he'd said yes. Come back tomorrow, Nathan Walker had told me, with a real plan. I replayed those words over and over in my head like a song stuck on loop. Part of me felt like I'd just climbed Mount Everest barefoot. The other part, like I was about to fall straight off the cliff. Because now, I had to deliver. I caught the 5:45 bus home. It was crowded and smelled like damp umbrellas and tired people. I squeezed into a corner seat and held my backpack close to my chest, like it could keep my thoughts from spilling out. When I got home, Marcus was sitting on the floor in front of the TV, eating cold pizza from a plate balanced on a history book. Mom was asleep on the couch with a heating pad on her chest, her breathing soft but labored. "You're late," Marcus said, not looking away from the screen. "I had a weird day." He turned then, sensing something different in my voice. "What happened?" "I think I might have been invited to a high-level meeting by accident." He raised an eyebrow. "Like a staff meeting?" I sat on the edge of the armchair, heart still pounding. "No, like the kind where people in suits argue over losing millions of dollars." He blinked. "And they let you stay?" I nodded slowly. "Not just stay. They asked me to come back tomorrow with ideas. Real ones." Now Marcus was sitting up straight, pizza forgotten. "Wait, you? Like you? I smiled faintly. "Me. He grinned. "Damn, Em. That's kinda badass." I exhaled sharply, burying my face in my hands. Or insane? Or suicidal? I don't know. What if I mess this up? "You won't." "How can you be so sure?" He shrugged. "Because you've been studying this stuff longer than most of them. You just never had the title. Now someone noticed. Maybe it's about time the world caught up to who you already are." He said it so casually, so confidently, like he'd always known I was more than a janitor, like he'd never once doubted my worth. And for a moment, I believed him. But later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, and the apartment was silent except for the occasional creak of old floorboards and the hum of the fridge, the doubt crept back in. I sat at the kitchen table with my cracked laptop, an old spiral notebook, and a cup of instant coffee that tasted like regret. The clock above the stove ticked past midnight. Every time I tried to type, my hands shook. What was I even doing? I wasn't a consultant. I wasn't a strategist. I was a girl who cleaned bathrooms, a high school dropout who taught herself business through secondhand books and corporate trash. What if I showed up tomorrow and they laughed in my face? What if Nathan Walker realized he'd made a mistake? The fear was loud. But louder, just slightly, was a small voice in my gut. The same voice that had whispered, "Go," when Leah called my name. The voice that had told me to speak up in the boardroom. The voice that never stopped whispering, "You belong here." So I opened a blank document. I titled it in bold black letters, Westbridge Tech, Customer-Centered Turnaround Strategy. Then I started writing. I pulled every thread I'd collected over the past year. Notes I'd written to myself on breaks. Observations I'd made while cleaning offices. Complaints I'd overheard from customers calling the support line. Patterns I'd seen in unused marketing material thrown out too early. All of it, the overlooked details, suddenly had value. I outlined 3 core problems: disconnection from real users, product bloat, features no one asked for, loss of mission clarity. And then I proposed solutions. A direct feedback loop between engineers and frontline customers. A simplified version of the core product, focused on usability. A short-term rebrand that recenters the company around a human story. Not innovation for its own sake, but innovation that serves. I worked until the sun began to rise, my eyes burning, my fingers sore from typing. But when I hit save, something in me shifted. I didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I felt ready. The next morning, I didn't wear my janitor uniform. Instead, I borrowed my mom's old blazer, a little too wide in the shoulders but clean and pressed. I pulled my hair into a bun and wore the black slacks I usually saved for job interviews. They were faded at the knees, but they made me feel like someone else. No, not someone else. Someone more me than anyone had ever seen before. When I walked into the Westbridge Tower that morning, I didn't take the back elevator. I walked through the front, past the security desk, past the other assistants. I showed my temporary badge and said, "I'm here for the executive strategy meeting." They let me through. The elevator ride to the 34th floor felt different this time. The mirror wasn't broken. It reflected back a young woman who had something to say, and finally had the chance to say it. When I stepped into conference room A, they were already there. Suits, tablets, quiet tension. Nathan Walker looked up from his seat at the head of the table. His expression was unreadable, but he gave a slight nod. "Ms. Carter," he said, "you have the floor." And just like that, it was my turn to speak. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and began. I had never spoken in a boardroom before. Truth be told, I'd never spoken in any room where people actually listened. For most of my life, when I talked, people talked over me. Or worse, smiled politely while thinking about something else. But now every eye in the room was on me. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. The conference room was too cold. The lights were too white. I could see my reflection in the glass wall across from me, and for a moment, I barely recognized the woman standing there. But I took a breath, and I started talking. "I want to thank you all for giving me this chance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know I'm not who you expected to see standing here. I don't have an MBA, I didn't come from Stanford or Wharton, but I do have something else." I paused. "I've been cleaning this building for almost 2 years. I've walked past your whiteboards. I've picked up your reports from the trash. I've listened to frustrated interns and burned-out managers and angry customers on speakerphone. And what I've seen, what I've learned, is that this company doesn't have a money problem." I clicked the remote, bringing up the first slide on the screen. It was a simple graph showing customer engagement over time. The decline was sharp, painful, but clear. "You have a trust problem." A murmur went through the room. Not disagreement, recognition. I moved on. In the last year, the product team launched 3 major features. But according to user feedback from online forums, only one of them was actually requested by customers. The others looked good in presentations but created friction in real use. Another slide. Side-by-side screenshots of customer complaints. They didn't leave because your app was ugly. They left because you stopped listening. Silence. I glanced at Nathan Walker. His hands were steepled under his chin. Still watching. Still unreadable. "The good news," I continued, "is that the fix isn't about reinventing everything. It's about returning to what made this company matter in the first place." I clicked to the next slide. Reconnection Strategy, Phase 1. Over the next 10 minutes, I walked them through my proposal. Human-centered feedback loops. Set up weekly customer voice sessions where users directly engage with developers. Pull insights from customer support logs and community forums to guide product updates. Use anonymous surveys not just for NPS, Net Promoter Score, but for emotional sentiment tracking. Product simplification. Eliminate or pause development on features with under 20% engagement. Focus on speed, clarity, and intuitive design. Launch a Back to Basics beta version. Invite loyal customers to help co-create it. Internal culture reset. Reignite the mission. Tech that makes life feel lighter. Create innovation open hours. Anyone in the company, regardless of department, can pitch ideas. Highlight frontline stories in internal memos, janitors, cafeteria workers, support staff, to rebuild internal empathy. When I finished, I closed my laptop slowly, letting the silence breathe. And for the first time, no one laughed. There were no scoffs, no awkward glances, no patronizing smiles. Just silence. Then the man with silver hair, the same one who had gestured for me to sit the day before, leaned forward. "I'll admit," he said, "I wasn't sure what we'd get today. But what you've shown here, it's more clarity than we've had in 6 months." Another executive, a woman with tightly coiled curls and a no-nonsense voice, chimed in. "It's practical, it's humble, and it's exactly what we needed." I exhaled so deeply I almost collapsed. And then Nathan spoke. "I agree," he said simply. "Let's begin implementation." A quiet murmur rippled across the table again. This time, less resistance, more acceptance. A few people nodded. One or two started jotting down notes. "But," Nathan added, "we'll need someone to oversee this, to make sure it stays true to the spirit you just presented." He looked at me. "Would you be willing to lead this initiative?" I blinked. Was he serious? I mean, You're not a consultant, I know," he said, reading my mind. "That's why I'm asking you. You're not operating from theory. You're speaking from experience. But don't tell me what you don't have," he interrupted gently. "Tell me what you're willing to give." I stood there for a moment, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm willing to give everything I've got," I said softly, "because I believe this company still has something worth fighting for." He nodded. "Then let's get to work." I left the room a different woman than the one who entered it. In the hallway, Leah from reception passed me and did a double take. "Wait, weren't you?" "Yes," I smiled. "I was." I didn't explain. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for being seen. Later that day, I got a temporary promotion. I wasn't officially part of any department. HR hadn't figured out what to do with me yet. But they gave me a desk, a title, Project Coordinator, Customer Reconnection Strategy, and an email address. I typed my first message that afternoon. Just seeing carterowestbridgetech.com on the screen made my eyes sting with tears. It felt real. It felt right. And yet, I knew the hardest part was still to come. Respect is fragile. One wrong move, and everything I'd built could be swept away. Not everyone liked that I'd skipped the proper path. Not everyone wanted a janitor in the boardroom, no matter how good her ideas were. But I didn't care. Because that room had changed something in me. Not just how they saw me, but how I saw myself. I always thought the hardest part would be getting in the room. Turns out, staying there was much harder. The first week after my presentation felt like a dream. My name was suddenly whispered in meetings. People stopped me in the hallway, some with polite curiosity, others with cautious admiration. I'd gone from the janitor to that girl from the meeting almost overnight. But there was something else in the air too. Something colder. Not everyone was happy about my presence. It started subtly. My ID badge stopped working on the executive floor, twice in 1 week. The first time, I laughed it off. The second time, I stood in the hallway for 20 minutes until someone buzzed me in. Then someone accidentally deleted my calendar invites. Important meetings, all gone. I only found out because I passed the CFO in the hallway, and she asked why I hadn't shown up. And the looks, those were the worst. I'd enter a room and feel the tension, like I'd tracked dirt onto a clean carpet. People would smile, but not with their eyes. A few wouldn't even bother. I heard the whispers. She's a fluke. She just got lucky. She probably flirted with the CEO. That one burned the most. It didn't matter that I'd worked twice as hard or stayed up all night studying. To them, the idea of someone like me, a janitor, a girl from the South Side, having earned her seat, that was impossible. One afternoon, I overheard two executives near the elevator. She has no formal training, one said. What happens when she actually messes up? She will, the other replied, without hesitation. It's just a matter of time. I swallowed the lump in my throat and kept walking. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the work. I built out phase 2 of the strategy, scheduled my first cross-departmental customer voice workshop, and coordinated a beta rollout of the simplified product interface. I even received a short email from Nathan that said simply, "Keep going, it's working." But that made things worse, because now the whispers turned to resistance. People stopped responding to my emails. I'd walk into meetings and find that my access to documents had mysteriously been revoked. When I asked about it, I got shrugs. Must be an IT glitch. Right. Even Marcus noticed something was off. "Why do you look like someone kicked your puppy?" he asked one night while we were eating dinner. "I'm being iced out," I admitted. Quietly, professionally, like I'm some infection they're waiting for the company to flush out. He looked up from his plate. "Can you prove it?" I shook my head. That's the problem. It's all shadow moves, denial. "Oh, must be a mistake. We'll look into it. Nothing I can pin down." "So, what are you going to do?" I sighed. "I don't know yet." Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I could win this kind of battle. I didn't speak their language. I didn't have the armor of pedigree or power. I had one thing: results. And I knew if those faltered, even for a moment, they'd have their excuse to cut me out. The breaking point came during a budget meeting for phase 2 of the project. I'd submitted a modest request: funds for user testing tools and a part-time data analyst to help manage feedback loops. But when I arrived at the meeting, I noticed something off. The finance lead, a man named Greg Holloway, wouldn't look at me. Halfway through the session, he pulled up a budget report that had my request. But next to it, in red, was the word rejected. "Rejected?" I asked. "By who?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Senior Oversight Committee." I blinked. There's no such committee for this phase. More silence. "Greg," I said carefully, "was this decision made in a meeting I wasn't invited to?" No answer. I felt the room tilt. Nathan Walker wasn't present that day. He was overseas for an investor summit, and in his absence, they'd struck. I stood slowly, papers in hand. "You know," I said to no one in particular, "you don't have to slam a door to shut someone out. Sometimes, all you need to do is make them knock long enough that they give up." Greg flushed. "Emily." "No," I said, steadying my voice. "You made your move. Now I'll make mine." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I strategized. I pulled every data point I had: usage stats, early customer feedback, cost-benefit projections, and created a 15-slide deck titled "How Resistance Kills Innovation, a Case Study in Real Time." The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Nathan. He returned from the summit 2 days later. We met in his office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that made you feel small on purpose. He looked tired but curious. "What's going on?" I handed him the deck. He read silently, page by page, word by word. When he got to the end, he looked up at me and said, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I wanted to fight my own battles," I replied. "But this one, it's not about me. It's about the work. If they kill this project, they're not just pushing me out. They're silencing the people this company forgot." He nodded slowly. "I'll handle it." And he did. Within a week, Greg Holloway was reassigned. The committee was dissolved. My access was fully restored. And at the next all-hands meeting, Nathan stood before the entire company and said, "Innovation doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it carries a mop. Don't forget who brought the clarity back when we needed it most." I stood in the back of the room, unseen again, but this time, by choice. And this time, the silence felt different. Not rejection, respect. There are moments in life you never expect to live. Moments you only see in movies or read about in glossy magazines. For me, that moment came on a Thursday morning, in the very same building where I used to clean gum off the carpet and scrub fingerprints off glass doors. Westbridge Technologies was holding its quarterly All Hands, a company-wide meeting meant to align vision, celebrate progress, and share updates with all 400-plus employees. Normally, I avoided those, not because I wasn't interested, but because I didn't belong. Janitorial staff rarely attended. We were always behind the scenes, making sure the place sparkled for the people who sat in the seats. But this time, I wasn't behind the scenes. I was on the agenda. It was Nathan's idea. After weeks of steady results from the customer reconnection strategy, positive feedback, higher app retention, and even a few news outlets noticing the company's return to human focus, he wanted to showcase the story behind it all. And that story, somehow, was me. I tried to talk him out of it. "I'm not a public speaker," I told him. "You don't have to be," he replied. "You just have to be honest. That's what got us here in the first place." So I said yes, and immediately regretted it. The night before the all-hands, I could barely sleep. I kept practicing in front of the mirror in our cramped bathroom, brushing imaginary lint off my secondhand blazer, and reciting my lines like I was preparing for trial. Marcus sat on the edge of the tub, arms crossed, trying to help. "Stop sounding like you're giving a TED Talk," he said. "I'm nervous," I groaned. "Then let them see that. You're not a machine, Em. That's the whole point. You're you. They'll listen to that." He was right. Again. So the next morning, I walked into the Westbridge Auditorium with my notes folded in my pocket, a knot in my stomach, and 1,000 tiny voices in my head screaming, "What if you trip? What if they laugh? What if you freeze?" But when I walked on stage, they clapped. Not a thunderous movie-style ovation, but real warm applause, the kind that says, "We see you now." I took a deep breath and began. "Some of you know me, most of you don't. My name is Emily Carter. I used to clean the floors in this building. Now I help lead one of our key strategy initiatives." I paused, letting that settle in. I didn't get here through the front door. I slipped in through a crack. One small mistake, one mispronounced name, one moment of someone calling on the wrong person. But I stayed, because in that moment, I spoke. And someone, a few someones, listened. I saw heads nodding. I don't have a fancy degree. I didn't come up through product or marketing. But I know people. I've spent years being invisible. And when you're invisible, you notice everything. You hear the things people say when they think no one's listening. You see how culture is lived, not written. You understand what hurts and what heals. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me showed 2 charts, one with customer churn before the initiative and one after. We didn't just lower churn, we reconnected. We reminded our users that there are real people on this side of the screen, and that we're listening again. A smattering of applause. I was once the girl no one noticed. Now I'm here to remind you that the person with the best idea might not be in the meeting. She might be taking out the trash just outside the door. This time, the applause came stronger. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about revenge on the people who once ignored me. It was about opening the door wider for the next Emily. And the next one after her. After the event, something incredible happened. People came up to me, dozens of them. Engineers, interns, admins, some from departments I didn't even know existed. One young designer, maybe 23, eyes wide with emotion, said, "I started here 2 months ago and haven't spoken in a single meeting. I thought I had to wait years before anyone would take me seriously. But hearing you, I think I'll speak up." An older man from IT clapped me on the shoulder and said, "That was the most human thing I've seen in this company in years. Thank you." Even Greg Holloway, yes, that Greg, approached me later in the hallway. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You're the real deal." I nodded. "Thanks. And for the record, I never wanted your job." He chuckled. "No, but you earned the respect that comes with it. Took me 20 years to learn how to listen. You already have that part figured out." That afternoon, Nathan called me into his office. "I meant every word of what I said on stage," he said. "You didn't just contribute to this company, you helped save its soul." I smiled. I just said what no one else wanted to say out loud. He leaned forward. "I've been thinking. We need someone to lead a new division. One focused entirely on employee culture and human-centered innovation. Not just product, people. I want you to build it." I froze. "Me?" "Yes, you. But I'm still learning." He grinned. "So am I. That's the point." I looked out the window. The sun was hitting the bay just right, casting everything in a kind of soft gold. And for the first time since that fateful morning when someone called my name by mistake, I let myself believe I belonged here. Not because I'd proven myself to them, but because I'd finally proven myself to me. They say legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build that outlives you. I never set out to build a legacy. I just wanted to be seen. But 10 months after the day I first stood in that boardroom, in a janitor's uniform, with shaking hands and an idea no one had asked for, I stood again in front of the Westbridge Tower. Only this time, the name on the side of the building had changed. The Carter Center for People-Driven Innovation. They unveiled it during the company's anniversary celebration, a massive all-day event with banners, catered food, speeches, and even a string quartet in the lobby. I had no idea they were planning it. I thought I was just attending to present a progress report on our employee-led innovation program. Instead, Nathan Walker stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and said, "Before we begin today's festivities, I'd like to take a moment to honor the person who reminded us that the best ideas don't always come from the corner office, but sometimes from the corners we ignore." He paused, then smiled. "Emily Carter, would you join me on stage?" I froze. Was this real? The applause began even before I moved. I walked slowly toward the stage, legs unsteady, heart pounding, trying not to cry. There, in front of hundreds of employees, janitors and designers, receptionists and executives, stood a giant velvet curtain covering a new panel on the outer wall. Nathan turned to me. "You gave this place its soul back. We wanted to give you something in return." He pulled the cord, and there it was. My name, carved in steel, etched into glass. Not because I was famous, not because I'd donated millions, but because I had dared to speak when I wasn't supposed to. After the ceremony, people asked how it felt. Truth? It didn't feel real. I kept thinking about my first week at Westbridge, cleaning toilets and hiding my lunch in a supply closet so no one would ask why I didn't eat in the cafeteria. I thought about the days I used to ride the M55 bus in silence, studying business reports from the recycling bin and whispering dreams to myself like prayers. I thought about my mother, how she cried when I told her they were naming a building after me. "You always had something inside you," she said. The world just finally caught up. And I thought about all the other Emilys still out there, people who've been told in 100 silent ways that they don't matter. People who've been labeled unqualified or unpolished or not quite right. People who've sat in the back, waiting for a chance that never came. That's why the building mattered. It wasn't about the name. It was about the door. Because from that day on, anyone who walked into Westbridge Tower would walk through the Carter Center, a space designed for bold ideas from unexpected voices, a space where no one's role would disqualify their vision. We turned the first floor into a collaborative hub. No titles, no corner offices, just round tables and whiteboards and couches that encouraged conversation. We hosted monthly idea jams, open to everyone, where people from janitorial to marketing to legal pitched ideas. Some were wild, some were messy, but some were brilliant. And because of that program, we launched 2 new tools that ended up increasing our customer retention by 14%, both proposed by a 23-year-old customer service rep named Tasha, who had never even been invited to a product meeting before. I made it my mission to be there for every session, not just to supervise, but to remind people that possibility doesn't wear a uniform. It lives in everyone. One afternoon, as I was walking through the atrium, I noticed a girl, young, maybe 19, standing near the Carter Center sign, just staring at it. She had a maintenance badge clipped to her belt. I approached gently. "You okay?" I asked. She blinked, startled, then nodded. "Yeah. Sorry, I read about you in the newsletter. I didn't know you started in my role." I smiled. "It's not just a role." She hesitated. "Sometimes it feels that way." I knew that feeling all too well. I motioned for her to follow me. We sat in one of the lounge chairs by the big bay windows. "I used to scrub these windows," I told her. "Right there. I remember watching the sun hit them and thinking, this is the closest I'll ever get to the top floor." She looked down. "I want more, but I don't even know where to start." "Start by refusing to disappear," I said. "Start by learning everything you can, even if it's in secret. Start by speaking, even when your voice shakes. Especially then." She wiped a tear and nodded. That's when I knew the building had done its job. Not because it had my name, but because it made someone else believe she could rise too. At home that night, Marcus was waiting with a cake. It was terribly frosted and slightly lopsided, but he'd tried to spell CARTER with M&Ms across the top. "You're officially famous," he said, grinning. I laughed. "I'm not famous." "Please, you're a building now. That's like Beyoncé level." I rolled my eyes, but inside, I was glowing. Not because of the applause, not because of the speeches or steel letters, but because I had found my voice and used it not just to climb, but to lift. Some stories don't end where they begin. They bend, they fold, they twist back toward their origin. Only this time, you return changed. It was nearly a year to the day after that fateful meeting when I found myself holding a familiar object, my old janitor's ID badge. I'd found it while cleaning out a drawer in my office. Yes, my office, with a door and a nameplate and windows that overlooked the city. The badge was scratched, the photo faded, the lanyard frayed at the edges. But seeing it again made my chest tighten. That face. That girl. She looked tired. Small, hopeful in a way that scared her. I sat back in my chair, holding the badge like it was a relic. Because in a way, it was. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was a reminder of who I used to be, and who I could have remained, if I hadn't said yes. Yes to staying in that meeting. Yes to opening my mouth. Yes to believing, even when no one else did. And now, everything had come full circle. It started when HR contacted me. "We'd like you to welcome the next round of entry-level hires," the woman said over the phone. "Not just new developers and analysts. We're including facilities, food service, maintenance, everyone." I felt something shift in me. In the past, those orientations happened behind closed doors. Janitors were trained separately. Their introductions were brief, almost invisible. Now, we were rewriting the rules. "Absolutely," I said. So that Friday, I stood in front of a group of 30 new hires in the main auditorium. They were diverse in every way: age, background, ethnicity, department. Some wore suits, some wore steel-toed boots. All looked equally uncertain, and I saw myself in every one of them. "I want to tell you a story," I began. "It's not in the handbook, but it's part of this place now." I told them everything. About the day I walked into a boardroom by mistake. About the moment someone said, "Go ahead." About the fear, the whispers, the sabotage, and the belief that grew in me inch by inch until it became stronger than my fear. You might think your role doesn't matter yet. You might think you need to wait 5 years before you raise your hand. But I'm here to tell you, that's not true. You belong now. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone clapped, then another. And before I knew it, 30 people were on their feet, not for who I was, but for what I'd reminded them. Their voice matters. Later that week, I was invited to attend a panel at a tech conference in San Diego. The theme? Invisible Talent: Why the Next Great Idea Won't Come From Where You Think. I sat alongside founders, professors, and CEOs, but when it was my turn to speak, I didn't recite my resume. I told a story. I told my story. And afterward, a young man in a catering uniform approached me in the hallway. He was shaking. "I've been working these events for 2 years," he said. "This is the first time I've ever seen someone like me on stage." He wasn't just talking about race, or class, or title. He meant spirit. He meant that flicker of possibility that so often gets smothered in corporate corridors. I shook his hand. "You won't be working behind the curtain forever," I told him. "Keep going." When I came home from the conference, I walked past the lobby of Westbridge Tower and saw something new. A small brass plaque near the elevator, in honor of all the voices we didn't hear in time, but hear now, and will never ignore again. I didn't write it, but I knew who did. Nathan's signature was at the bottom. I smiled and traced the words with my fingers, because this was the real legacy. Not a building with my name, not a headline, but a culture that no longer needed to be reminded that value has no dress code. One rainy evening, long after hours, I walked back through the building alone. Lights off, halls quiet, the smell of floor wax in the air. I passed the old janitorial closet on the lower level, the one where I used to keep my lunch, where I cried once when I thought no one would ever see me. I opened the door. Inside was a new mop, some supplies, and a photo. Taped to the wall, slightly crooked. It was of me, standing on stage during the unveiling ceremony. Underneath, someone had written, "Started here, spoke up, stayed." I stood there in the quiet, tears burning at the edges of my eyes. That closet used to be a prison. Now it felt like a shrine. Full circle. I used to think life was like a hallway with 1,000 locked doors. And I was born without the key. But now I know. Sometimes the key isn't given to you. You are the key. You're the one who has to speak, even when your voice trembles. Step forward, even when your knees shake. Stay in the room, even when no one looks at you like you belong. Because what makes you invisible today might be what saves the room tomorrow. People often ask me if I ever went back to cleaning. The answer is yes. Once a month, I still show up at dawn, put on gloves, and mop the floors before the sun rises. Not because I have to, but because I want to remember what it felt like to walk these halls unseen. Because it's easy to forget where you came from when the glass doors open for you automatically. But I won't forget. Not ever. Because I am not just a director. Not just a name on a building. I am the girl who was once called by mistake and answered with everything she had. So if you're watching this, maybe you feel invisible too. Maybe you're waiting for permission, or a sign, or someone to tell you you're enough. Let this be it. Let this be the moment you stop waiting for the world to open the door and start kicking it open yourself. Because your story matters, even if they don't hear it yet. Say it anyway, because someone will. One day, someone will. Thanks for walking this journey with me. If this story moved you, stay close. There are more voices to uncover, more stories to tell, and more doors to open together. Tap subscribe if you believe in second chances. Like this video if you've ever been underestimated. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been called by mistake, but stayed anyway?